Hi, today we will be painting an abstract impressionistic portrait. I'm going to break down my process and give you an overview of how I created this piece. So my name's Ludovico Clovis, I'm a visual artist, and this painting took about 12 hours. So I started off by finding a reference image. I used a friend of mine. It's on another screen because I actually hold it up as if I was like copying from a phone because that's what I'm used to. And I start off with this underpainting. As you can see here, I'm almost sculpting. I prefer to take a sculpting approach. I use a bigger brush. It just feels more natural to me. I get these little imperfections inside the painting that only come when you use like a big brush and you blend and you sculpt it out. And I feel like it's also something that I would do traditionally. So I try to get as detailed as possible with my underpainting if and when I'm trying to get more detail in the final piece. I notice that if I rely heavily on my drawing skills, I'll be able to render those things with paint better. But in this first stage, I'm really focusing on how the darks and lights are playing. So I want to establish if the painting is a very dark painting with light accent marks or a light painting with dark accent marks. I'm kind of thinking about composition and establishing composition at this point. So I'm zooming in and out to get a big overview of the piece, a lot similar to how an artist would zoom out, like walk back from or walk away from their canvas when they're painting so that they can see how the whole thing looks. So now I'm just focusing on refining those details. Like I said, I'm using a smaller brush, getting in things like eyelashes, refining edges, things like that, because a little secret is if you use a really thick brush, things don't have to be in line, but when you use a line, things have to be perfect. So I found that if I use a smaller brush to outline things, then I can properly get the correct position of them. But if I use a bigger brush, I can get away with less accurate things, but it won't look as detailed. So now I'm just lightening things, erasing things to get the correct amount of light. Another thing I think about when I'm dealing with skin is it's not an extremely contrastful surface. If you make it too contrasty, somebody can just look like a piece of metal or they can look kind of wet. So at this stage, I also noticed that my reference didn't go up. Like the reference image was not the same dimension as the canvas I was using, so I had to like cut off certain things because I didn't really know what to fill in the area with, like above her head and to the side. So I decided to like just scratch that out, and I will probably do something abstract there different. So now I'm just working on the eyebrows, refining features, and I'm doing it from afar because it needs to look good from afar and the whole piece needs to look cohesive in a kind of way. And I'm probably gonna do that a lot, zoom out, zoom in. And at this point, I decide on a color palette. So I'm very analytical with how I choose my colors. I actually picked a blue and orange color scheme. So I want to tweak the skin to be a little bit orange and have a little bit of maybe blue tone undertones in the shadows or something like that. That's usually how I go about with color schemes. But I also pick a dominant color and then an accent color. In this case, I was kind of following my gut a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I followed my gut quite a bit with this piece. So if you look at the bottom right corner, you can see the color palette there. I had some orange hues, and you can dance around with making it a little bit more red, a little bit more yellow, making the blue a little bit more green or a little bit more blue. And that's kind of how you can use color theory with skin colors, which was always an issue for me. and I try and keep the colors very normal in the beginning. I'll get a little bit crazy in the shadows, but I try and keep the colors close to lifelike. And after I fill in everything, you can see me just re-establishing some of those lines that I painted over, just to keep everything realistic, and still zooming out just to get a good overview of the whole colors are mixing and everything. And I start to work on the background a bit more too. So I'm working on the background and the actual subject simultaneously a little bit. But after I've established like just the good base values and the correct colors, I start to work with areas individually so that I can keep detail and focus inside that area. If I worked on the whole piece at the same time, I would not get detailed at all. I have to focus on one area so that I can nail that area, nail color variations, but also step back so that I'm still thinking about the other areas, because it's very easy to mess up an eye and render it in a wrong way. And then when you go to render the other eye, you render it in a different way if you're zoomed in, which is why I just keep everything zoomed out. It's probably a bad habit, but I sometimes lean into my computer, which is probably bad for my eyes. But I tried to zoom in a bit more for you guys. So here I'm just adding the brush work. I'm thinking about using a brush that's slightly bigger than it should be, and sometimes placing a color that doesn't match. Sometimes placing something that's a little bit darker than the area, a little bit lighter than the area, just so you can have a more visible brush stroke. I don't want to create a perfect piece. I want to create an interesting piece. I want to create something that I can see or that appeals to me. I don't worry about being too original with what I'm painting. I think the originality comes from your taste. If you're really interested in how maybe 3 artists paint and you choose certain colors, you'll find that you're not interested in everything that an artist makes. Maybe you like one painting by Van Gogh, or you like one painting by Leonardo da Vinci, and you decide to make more like that one painting and combine it with a little bit of what Van Gogh did. Then you have your quote unquote unique kind of style. So I noticed that the eye was not placed correctly, and it bugged me out, so I had to just erase it. And it sucks sometimes, but you have to do it. You have to have the discipline to make the best piece possible. And really erasing the eye is what turned this from a 6-hour piece to like a 12-hour piece, because I had to really get the proportions down. Usually inside these big pieces, I have issues with getting proportions. Like when something's super zoomed in, I used to use the grid method, but this was more freehand, so it's really tricky sometimes. But I would say always try and like see what aligns. So you can take a ruler and just see, okay, what aligns. The technique is called a plumb line, using a plumb line, and you can see what lines up. Like the corner of the eyelid might line up with the corner of the mouth or something like that, and that's how you check your proportions. So here I'm constructing this eye. I work from dark to light, and I really just try and sculpt out the form in a sense. But because I had that underpainting, I'm also focusing a little bit on more detail than I would if I didn't have the underpainting. So it would be more like construction and painting, construction with brush strokes if I didn't have the underpainting. But now it's a bit less general. I know exactly what values need to be placed where, how light something needs to be, how light the paint needs to be, and I work from there. So I'm just establishing also direction. So it's very important for me to communicate the direction that a form is bending with my brush strokes as I'm painting. Now, at this stage, the painting is starting to come together. The mouth is looking a little bit funny, and it can get a bit discouraging as you're painting inside this method, because it isn't like the whole thing is coming together yet. You're getting a good idea of how it's going to look, but it can kind of throw you off when one area is looking like this, another area is looking another way, and like just something isn't making sense. But you have to stay and you have to trust the process. So I was just refining some features around. So a lot of this ends up being me playing around with certain things that I notice. I jump around the piece a lot for variety's sake, because I do get bored. I take quite long to paint what I paint, because I put a lot of care into each brush stroke, and I try not to rely on the undo tool unless it's like actually something I didn't mean to place. If I meant to place it and it looks bad, more than likely I'll try and paint over it for that traditional feel. So at this point, the face is mostly done to me, and I start finishing the background, adding in a few more marks to make it more interesting, and adding in some more abstract colors that are out there, smudging things around. And I felt like something was missing this whole time. And the reference actually had on a pair of glasses, and I wanted to paint it without the glasses. But when I picked my reference, and I think that this is something that you should do, you should look and really say, why do I like this reference? What's standing out to me? What's making this interesting? Is it the eyes? Is it the nose? Is it the hair? Like, what makes this picture really interesting, and how can I emphasize that? Or what's not being emphasized that maybe I could emphasize in this and make that the center of attention? So for me, I had avoided putting the glasses there. I knew that I wanted to bring attention to the eyes, but I started to realize that I do need to bring them in. Like, even through making all of these abstract marks, which are 200% intuitive, I do think about things like balance, color theory, the general principles of art. But I feel like once you're aware of them and you've practiced them consciously and studied how other artists use them, you can allow your intuition to take over, because you become aware, and then you know how to fix something, or your brain is going to utilize that skill that you learned. So I brought the glasses in, and as soon as I did, I found balance. I was like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted. It allowed me to bring in some more dark values, and I ended up bringing these pinks in, which I feel really brought the whole painting to life. So this is the finished piece. I hope that you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed creating this. Hopefully more, because this piece was an actual headache, and I was stressed through the majority of creating it, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I hope that you're able to learn something. Leave a comment on what you may be struggling with your own process, and what other kind of videos you'd love to see from us.